Good evening. Welcome to the Midweek Bible study for Bethesda Baptist Church. And we're glad that you have decided to join us. This week has been kind of an exciting week, or maybe a difficult week, or a tough week, or for me, it's always exciting. And that is this is staff week for Texas Baptist. And so each day I've been traveling back into Dallas to our office is there, and we've been having staff meetings. And my center, the Center for Ministerial Health, has been meeting each afternoon, and so it's been a fun week because most of the time I don't get to see the other area reps, but today and since Monday we've got to see each other quite often, and it's always a fun time when all 9 of us get together. But tonight, as we come to our Bible study, we are on a journey through the Sermon on the Mount. And tonight we're going to look just at one verse, really, and it is just following the Beatitudes where Jesus had said, "Blessed or happy be," all of these things that he has shared with us. And the passage of Scripture is this. Jesus looks at his disciples and he says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men." We, in our society today, and in our churches today, in our communities today, we need leaders. We need men and women who will stand up and be leaders in their church, in their community, in their home. And often we're not finding that. We're finding that we have a lack of leadership sometimes in our churches and lack of leadership in our communities, and that makes life difficult. Jesus intended, I believe, for every believer, every one of his followers, to make a difference, to be a leader in the sense of leading to make a difference in our world. And you might think, I don't have a whole lot of leadership skills, and I don't know how to do a lot of things. I don't have an education, all of those things. But to be a leader for Jesus Christ and be in this sense, you don't need a seminary degree. You don't need a college degree. What Jesus needs more than anything else is for you to be willing to be a leader. He looked at his disciples. None of them were college educated. Some of them, I'm sure, had a mass amount of training in different things. Well, we just don't know all of those things. But they were very average men, but very capable men. Some were businessmen, others did other things. But they were who Jesus called. And he looked at them and he says, "You are the salt of the earth." Wow. I think maybe sometimes we need to go look in the mirror for a moment. And we need to look in the mirror and say, and remind ourselves, Jesus, you called me. You called me to this task to make disciples, to go into the world and make disciples, baptizing them. You made me to love others. You made me to share the gospel. You made me. The task is not somebody else's, it's mine. Jesus said to, to these disciples, "You are the salt of the earth." In our day and time, salt is something that we use all the time. but it doesn't get the recognition maybe that it used to at one time. At one time, salt was so valuable that people were actually, they labored and their pay was actually given to them in salt because it was so valuable. It was a trading commodity that was extremely valuable. And today we look on our tables, we look at in our counter, or we look in our cabinets. Well, we always have plenty of salt, and we don't see it necessarily as a trading commodity, but it is. It is important. In fact, the word salary that we use all the time, that a person works and he receives a salary, actually came or comes from the concept of being paid in salt. And so this gives you something of an ideal of how important salt was. And in Jesus' day, when Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth," he was putting great value on his disciples. Not only value, but when we look at salt, salt um, is valuable in many ways, but three that I really want to mention uh, tonight. In one way, salt was always used and has been through history as a preservative. Uh, Before there were refrigerators and being able to ice things down and keep things cold, often salt was used as the tool to keep things for a long period of time. Fishermen would often, they would catch the fish, then they would salt them down in order to preserve them. And so salt is a preservative. Uh, it keeps things fresh for a period of time, and has been used for that for many years. But salt is also used in this way. Salt is used medically. It is used to clean. And in Jesus' day, it was often used to clean wounds. They would take salt if you were wounded, and they would take salt and put it in the wound. And you know how that is. Salt really hurts when you put it into some kind of wound, but it had a way of killing the germs and removing things out of it. And it's still used that way in some places. It's used as sort of as a medicine, a cleansing type of medicine. And even today, you'll go to the doctor and with sinus issues or those kind of things, and the doctor might tell you to gargle with salt water in order to provide healing. But the third thing is salt has always been used to flavor things, to flavor our food. I think of popcorn immediately when I think of salt popcorn. I love popcorn, and popcorn, with just a little bit of salt. Oh man, it's just great. And most of you have all been to the theater, and when I go to the theater, I always like to get some popcorn. Um, I I know it's expensive, and I'll dish out my $20 bill and I buy the popcorn, and I go eat the popcorn. But they know this. The people who at the movie theaters know if you get popcorn, you're also going to get a drink because it is really difficult to eat salty popcorn and not have something to drink. And so, not only in the sense does salt flavor food, and it does it enhances anything that we eat, and even tonight, as I was eating tonight, uh, I use some salt on my food because it enhances the flavor. And we had watermelon, and I'm one that takes just a little bit of salt and puts it on my watermelon because I think it enhances the flavor of the watermelon. And I know that there's those who that's that I've just ticked off. Okay, but I do. I like my salt, and it adds flavor. So we find these things about salt. And so when Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth," he is saying to these disciples, one, that you are a preservative of the earth, that your life and everything helps preserve and keep things from rotting and ruining. Wow. That just the image of that is amazing for us as believers, that we have the ability to make a difference in that way in our world. But he is also saying to us that we have a healing element about us as believers, as followers of Christ. He says, "You are the salt. You provide healing and cleansing to those that are broken." And then when we think about salt adding flavor, he's saying, you add flavor, a spice to life. And along with that, a thirst. A thirst. And not necessarily in this sense of for water, but for spiritual water, to receive and to find Christ. So here is this great command to these disciples, and he points to them and he goes, "You are the salt. You are the preservative. You are the healing element. You are the one that brings flavor to the world. And you bring people to a place where they thirst to know Jesus Christ. You are the salt." Don't look around. Look at yourself. You are the salt. And not just for your little community or your little family or your church. He says, for the whole earth. Wow. You can make a difference by being the salt. But Jesus doesn't really stop there in that verse. He goes on and he says, "But if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men." Well, if you're a scientist at all and know much anything about salt, salt is salt. It's always going to have those uh, elements that make it salt. It can't change, and it will always be salty. But in Jesus' day, the salt came out of the Dead Sea, and always the salt was not always pure, and so it had elements around it that were impure. And if you didn't, if you allowed those elements to maybe to linger and to stay with the salt, and those elements that were not pure, it would ruin the taste to the place where you couldn't taste the salt. It had other taste to it. It would lose its value as a flavor. It would lose its value all the way around because of the other elements contaminating it and ruining it. We always have that as an issue. In our world, uh, we have this danger that we will allow the world to contaminate our saltiness, our purity, our ability to preserve, our ability to heal, our ability to flavor life. We have the possibility of losing that by allowing the world to contaminate us. And so when that took place in the day and time that Jesus walked on this earth, what they would do with the salt at that point would be they would use it on the trails. They would use it on the highways. They would throw it out. And because that salt, even in its contaminated form, would bring what? It destroyed anything that was living. And it kept the roads clean. And that's how they used it. They trampled it on the trails, on the roadways, to make sure everything died. I don't think that's the way most of us want to be used. We don't want to bring death to life. We don't want to bring death to things. We don't want to be trampled on. We want to make a difference. How do we do that? Here's how. Shake your salt. Shake the salt in your life. Let God use your life to make a difference. Keep that salt pure by walking close to Christ and not allowing it to get contaminated. And you and I, we can be the salt that makes the difference. But don't keep it in your salt shaker. Shake the salt. Let's be the salt of the earth. Thank you for going through our Bible study tonight with us, and I look forward to continuing this series. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday as we continue to look at the church and letting the church be the church. And so I hope that you'll be with us Sunday morning, and I hope that you'll be in prayer for those on our prayer list for this week at Bethesda Baptist Church. And you have a good evening and a good week.